the dark horse candidate for getting extended to me is still Comanche 3 being the last coal plant in 2031, the year that Xcel has already been kind of raising red flags at the PUC, saying we've got a bunch of shortfalls coming, and the replacement purchase power agreements for wind and solar, those are getting more expensive, and a lot of the projects aren't showing up. If you start to see that pressure build, I could very well see whatever the federal government says. I could very well see maybe the state even having to sheepishly tail between its legs say,
Say we can't.
we got to push this back a little bit. We can't afford to drop off this much baseload power off the grid and still keep the lights on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's show, we wanted to talk a little bit about what's shaping up to be a kind of a brewing federalism fight between Colorado and the Trump administration when it comes to energy policy. Thanks to, I think it was really spearheaded by the most recent crop of executive orders.
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of fun because I'm just going to call Colorado. I think you said it. I'll take it from you. Our fair weather federalism state. They've suddenly discovered federalism over the last during this Trump administration, certainly during the last one, but God knows they didn't have it during the Biden administration or the Obama administration. And in fact, I'm old enough to remember House Bill 1365 in 2010, when the EPA was the boogeyman. They were going to make us do all this stuff. So we should just get ahead of it and set national precedents for fuel switching from coal to natural gas. And the Independence Institute rightly was opposed to that bill, saying, well, we're just one legislative fix away from going from natural gas to 100% wind, solar, and batteries. Who knew? Well, we did. Anyway, so what we have now, two stories out of the Colorado Sun. Of course, we'll drop them in the show notes. One came out on Monday. The other one came out on Tuesday. Actually, I should say Monday, April 14th, and Tuesday, April 15th. So two stories that came out that really the foundation of them involves these executive orders. First one is a lawsuit, and I'm actually thrilled to see this because I will use words that I have heard Kathleen Skama use from Western Energy Alliance, which is, grow a pair. I'm glad to see the Western Slope COGA, Oil and Gas Association, but this is the Western Slope, suing the state over some rather draconian rules that were set. And this goes to the executive order that was signed by the president that specifically addresses state overreach on things like greenhouse gas emissions. When we talked about that on one of our shows, I think I labeled it, this, I'm pretty sure could have been titled, the executive order directed specifically at Colorado, because Colorado sees energy policy and environmental policy through one singular lens, and that is emissions only. Everything is about emissions. And so everything they do, there is no holistic approach. There's no, can we find a balance? Everything is through this myopic lens of emissions and going to zero greenhouse gas emissions, or it depends on if Polis's bill gets late bill status. It ends up being, it would be by 2040. But here's what you see. So you have Western Slope COGA. This is a branch of COGA, Colorado Oil and Gas Association, that is looking to sue the state over these overreaching regulations that they passed. I think this was last year, or was it 2 years ago?
Tail end December of last year, and they kind of went into effect earlier this year.
Okay. So
first of its kind rules in the
country. This is what you see, Phil Weiser. So this gets to this whole federalism showdown. We've seen other efforts to intimidate states and other actors, and we won't be intimidated. That's what Phil Weiser says. There is no legal basis for this. and any attempt by federal government to prevent Colorado from enforcing its laws will be challenged in court, which is, okay, that's exactly what they want. Everybody wants to go to court on this. Western Slope Koga wants to go to court. The Trump administration would be more than happy to go to court over this. And so Colorado will have to go to court to defend it. But the funny thing about this is we're not going to be intimidated. Listen, they've been using the EPA as a boogeyman for 2 decades now for more and more stringent regulation on energy development in this state. So the idea that we're not going to be intimidated by anyone is just laughable.
Yeah, it is like I said, fair weather, I think, kind of describes it because it is a sudden change of heart that seems to have come very recently. I do think it's worth noting this is an interesting test case because of the nature of the regulation that they're challenging here, the Western Slope Koga. It's the Air Quality Control Commission passed midstream rules, the first time that we really cracked down on midstream operators, so the pipelines that bring things from the wellhead to the distribution side that actually gets to where it needs to go. And what they did is another one of these abbreviated timelines with aggressive emissions. It says basically by 2030 that any midstream operator has to slash its emissions by about a little over 20% by 2030. So 5 years after these rules go into effect, you have to 1/5 your emissions. And these folks are already saying we're facing a ton of pressure already by the states. Stuff we've covered, ad nauseum, the regulatory climate that we already have, and you're hearing more and more from operators that this is just not going to be feasible. I saw one estimate. I'll drop this article in the show note too. At the time that the rules were being considered, they predict that it could cost them about $86 million a year to, comply with these rules. So we're talking about serious economic harm here in a state that, against all odds, all efforts by the state government to put them out of business, is still a substantial contributor to the Colorado economy. So this is going to be, I think, a one to watch for sure, and an interesting test case for what can be done as it relates to that executive order.
And here's something that I think was interesting. I didn't realize this. So state officials said the new rules were innovative under past Clean Air Act practices by requiring, so listen to this, requiring oil and gas companies to remove compressors currently powered by fossil fuels and install brand new equipment that runs on electricity. So you can't use the product that you're actually developing to power your compressor.
Yep.
You have to have a line. You have to install all new equipment. I'll tell you what, that's going to drive up the cost for you and for me. And if you remember, we had Ryan Zorn on from Liberty Energy a few weeks ago. And remember what he said about production in Colorado? It's down dramatically. And it just so happens that revenue from oil and gas is down dramatically. At the same time, the state has a $1 billion shortfall that it has to figure out how to close it. So they are committing yet. It's another sign of the death by 1,000 cuts, this economic suicide that the state seems to be on. And I love this too. This is classic Jared Polis gaslighting you. You just have to listen to this. Jared Polis sent an email statement to the Sun, and this is what he said. He finds it disappointing that Trump is trying to prop up more expensive energy sources while penalizing the market-driven sources that Coloradans and Americans are looking for. So his own Colorado Energy Office, his own CEO, his own Colorado Energy Office says the most expensive way to decarbonize is wind, solar, and batteries. And by the way, there's nothing market-driven about them. I keep wondering if wind and solar are so much less expensive, why does it take billions of dollars in subsidies, plus government mandates, plus regulatory mental gymnastics to get fossil fuels off the grid? If it is so market driven, why are our prices all skyrocketing?
Right. And why the need for the Air Quality Control Commission to mandate electrification for midstream
Right.
If it's market driven, if there's an advantage, they ought to be doing that
They
themselves.
should be excited
It'll
about
save
it.
their money. Yeah.
They should just be happy that they're doing it. Instead, you know what they're doing? They're filing a lawsuit against the state.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's no coincidence that they're it's similar timing to these executive orders. Listen, I've got no way to know this, but I'm sure they knew something was coming out. But more importantly, it got attention once that executive order came out that said we are going to look at states that are overly zealous in their greenhouse gas emissions. And like I said, pretty much could have said this is directed at you, Colorado. But and so the timing, is it coincidental? I doubt it. I think it's probably they probably looked at it and said thank you, or knew that something was coming out. So good for Western Slope. And the other thing the Western Slope said, and this is true, it's like, listen, oil and gas development on the Western Slope is not the same as it is on the Front Range.
Good point.
You can't just do this, one size fits all. But this is not an air quality board that they are not interested in anything less than being draconian. And they have come to some sort of truce with the larger players on the Front Range. But that doesn't mean that the Western Slope is going to roll over and agree with everything that Cooke and and some of the larger players on the Front Range came up with. Because, by the way, it's killing their industry. It's killing them. They can't afford it.
That's an excellent point, because, like you said, the big majors in the DJ Basin can weather a lot of regulatory cost, and like as you mentioned, sort of have a hand in some of it with their truces. It's it's a much different story for folks out on the Western Slope, where the industry is less prolific, still important, less prolific, and there's not the same giant institutional presence that you can just, we'll weather these costs, a couple million here and there. That's important. Obviously, we'll follow this as it proceeds. It's litigation, so it's bound to take a long time. Unfortunately, court time it tends to take far longer than I think would be satisfying to most people watching, but we will keep you updated on that.
Here's one of the things I just want to let folks know. We're going to see if they get an injunction.
Yeah.
Because that would be how the environmental judge shops. So are they going to judge shop it and get an injunction? But I don't know. It could be that they have to file in Denver District Court because of that. It's a state. Yeah. It's state law. But we'll see.
Yeah. But it does help that this regulation just took effect only a month or two ago, and that usually tends to increase the chances of getting an injunction.
And then I think you'll see the Federal Department of Justice get involved.
Yeah.
So this will be a fun one to watch.
But the other big Colorado Sun story that you mentioned that's, I think, worth commenting on deals with a different one of Trump's executive orders. And this is related to what he called beautiful, clean coal and supporting beautiful, clean coal. I know after he issued that, I fielded a ton of questions from folks wondering, what does this mean for Colorado? What does this mean for Colorado? Obviously, we still have about 6 or so coal plants still in operation. We have coal mines still operating in Colorado. A lot of folks wanted to know what that would mean in practice here. And a Colorado Sun story gives us some indication that it's probably not going to mean a whole lot, at least for now.
No. By the way, I just want to say, beautiful, clean coal. I'm going to hold him up. This is our coal. So he's made of coal, West Virginia coal in this case, but beautiful, clean coal. Yes, you're not being discriminated against. So this is interesting. The question is, are there any coal plants in Colorado that may be on the list that get an order from the Department of Energy and the DOJ to stay open? And it could be regardless of what the state of Colorado wants, or even regardless of what the utility wants. If it has a national security sort of interest, if it's like what Travis Deal said on the show, the CEO of Colorado Springs Utility, he said they provide power for NORAD and Fort Carson. I'm not certain that the DoD, Department of Defense, is excited about the fact that coal-fired power, reliable coal-fired power, to those two very important installations. I mean, how else are we going to track Santa? We have to,
right.
We've got to be able. What are kids going to do if they can't track Santa? But I can't imagine DoD being excited about a shutdown of a coal plant without suitable replacement ready immediately. And clearly in Colorado, we do not have that. So the question is, are there any coal plants in Colorado that would remain open? And the I guess conventional wisdom is, oh no, because Colorado's still going to shut down all of their coal plants. And of course, this is the thing I love. Why they're still going to shut down their coal plants? Because it makes economic sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
market driven again. Yeah.
Which, by the way, market driven for who? Maybe the utility.
Right. The market driven regulation. Don't you know?
Yeah. The market driven mandate, the mandate that you shut down and you can recover all the costs, and like Comanche 3, $1 billion in stranded assets. It's okay. Ratepayers can just pay for it. And then they'll also pay for the new generation that is there too, that will have to replace it. But they, and this is what makes me, Mark Jaffe is a good reporter for the most, but I don't know how these guys get quoted without any kind of serious questioning, because Eric Frankowski, who's the executive director of Western Clean Energy Campaign, he said, I guess in an email to Mark Jaffe, and this was about Craig Power, because the question is, will Craig or Comanche stay open? And he said, there's a reason that tri-state and utilities across the country are retiring coal, and that's because it's really expensive to mine and really expensive to burn. I'm like, so you're telling me the paid for coal plant that, by the way, where the mine, like in Craig, is just right down the road from it. They literally just have cars that go, rail cars that go back and forth between the mine and the plant. You're telling me that that is more expensive than building out new wind, solar plus batteries, which, as we've said a million times, the Colorado Energy Office has said is the most expensive way to decarbonize, and our own research has found that it's the most expensive way to decarbonize. He said there are far more affordable and far cleaner ways to generate electricity, and executive orders aren't going to change those underlying economics. I don't know what economic school he went to, but my utility bills, research from the Independence Institute, research from the Colorado Energy Office say the exact opposite.
Well, especially because if folks will remember, Tri-State was one of the last to kind of sign on to the whole coal plant closure thing. You remember we kept seeing co-ops dropping from buying power from Tri-State because they had local
coal
desires to do 100% renewables, and they were all angry at Tri-State because Tri-State was pushing back, saying, "Hey, we need to keep Craig open because it's going to cost a lot of money to shut this thing down early and then tear it down and then rebuild a whole bunch of stuff to replace it." So I do think it's funny to once again claim that, this is all economic. This is purely economics driving this decision. The one thing I do think is important, though, that this centers on Tri-State and the Craig Station in particular, at least what it portends for the likely effect of this executive order, is that Tri-State, because it's a multi-state wholesale utility, it's not like a totally state regulated entity like XL and Black Hills are. It's FERC regulated, so there is more of a federal nexus there. And so I think it would be the one that's maybe the best test case for how much federal executive oversight would impact what it decides to do. And the fact that they're, at least for now, still saying that they're going to go ahead and shutter the plant tells me I wouldn't hold out much hope that coal is coming back in Colorado just because of an executive order.
Although, let me ask you, if you're Tri-State and Craig Power is located in Colorado, you're not going to say, yeah, we might keep it open, because you still want to be able to sell. You want to lose any more of your customers.
That's a good point.
But here's the thing, Tri-State, it's 1,285 megawatts. So let's just call it 1,300 megawatts. Here's what they're going to replace it with. It's going to add 307 megawatts of natural gas, with an ability to blend up to 30% hydrogen. I don't know that has that been done yet?
Certainly not here.
200 megawatts of battery storage in Moffat County, and that doesn't. I mean, do the math. That's 507 megawatts.
Right.
That ain't going to work. So here's what it calls for overall: roughly 300 megawatts of solar, 400 megawatts of wind, 650 megawatts of battery storage across Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. So again, if reliability is an issue, and for FERC, reliability is a huge issue.
Yeah.
I just don't know that Craig comes out and says, we're considering keeping it open under these executive orders.
Yeah, and I think because of Craig's date, 2028 would be the year that the last unit goes down. I think there'll be enough cushion there that we won't see things really hit the fan the way I still think, this is a sort of a dark, I don't want to be in the prediction business, but the dark horse candidate for getting extended to me is still Comanche 3 being the last coal plant in 2031, the year that Xcel has already been kind of raising red flags at the PUC, saying we've got a bunch of resource shortfalls coming, and the PPAs, to the replacement, purchase power agreements for wind and solar, those are getting more expensive, and a lot of the projects aren't showing up. If you start to see that pressure build, I could very well see whatever the federal government says. I could very well see maybe the state even having to sheepishly tail between its legs say
we can't,
we got to push this back a little bit. We can't afford to drop off this much baseload power off the grid and still keep the lights on.
And I think you could also say that about Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Because
the Ray Nixon.
There's the Nixon power plant, and Travis Deal saying power purchase agreements for wind and solar coming in significantly higher than what had been anticipated. And then you have that federal just nexus with the Department of Defense that they say, you know what? And I think that one's supposed to drop off by 2030.
Yep.
You could have this, you're not closing that. You have nothing to replace it with.
Especially we keep hearing there's gas turbine shortages because data centers want it. Utilities are trying to do fuel switching. There's a ton of demand for it. Solar supply chains, wind turbine supply chains are getting snarled and for all sorts of reasons, tariffs and demand in certain markets. There's just a lot of things that are headwinds in terms of shutting down perfectly usable assets and replacing them with something else that may or may not be available and may or may not be affordable if it is available. And certainly nuclear is not going to be there by the end of the decade. So
no, we're not going to. The one thing that we could get is some advancement in carbon capture or carbon sequestration.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing you could get, which would then could extend the life of those coal-fired assets. There is a list, and we'll drop it in the show notes, of 20 some odd coal-fired power plants across the country that have had their an exemption from the new MATS rule, which is the mercury rule. So they have an exemption which extends their life cycle to some extent. So Colorado, as much as Colorado wants to say it's going to close everything, I don't know. I think that might be, to your point, I think it might be premature to come out and say, yeah, everything's going to be offline by 2031. I get that the Sierra Club raises a lot of money off of that, but I'm not certain that's going to be, not when reliability is going to be hanging in the balance.
I was going to say there are just a lot of red flags, and you never know what things are going to look like 5 years from now. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners on either of these stories?
Yeah. So one, good for Western Slope Koga. I'm glad to see them fighting for their industry. You know what? It's about time. So there's that. Two, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think a coal plant in Colorado stays open past its scheduled retirement date. I think it's going to have to. I don't think the state's going to be able to afford another plant going offline. We're not going to have the baseload power. And then the last one, of course, because even if a coal plant does stay open, or maybe even two, you should still have a generator. And we need to do a show on generators. We'll do one over the summer specifically, so you know what we're talking about when we say get a generator. There are lots of options out there, but I'm going to tell you, get a generator to firm up your own grid.
Yep, firm up your own grid. I love it. But that does it for us on another episode here at PowerGab. If you like what you saw, you can head over to PowerGab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you want to reach out to us and suggest a future show topic or a guest you'd like to see us interview here, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. Until next week, we'll see you.